Hello again. Welcome to the wonderful world of sacred geometry. I'm your host, Nadi Hanna, and today we are talking about the Tesseract, which is one of my favorite geometries. I've said that every single entry. I just love it. But the Tesseract is unique in the world of geometry in that it is not of this dimension. It is a fourth dimensional shape, and it is the geometry of time travel. It is a hypercube and allows us to fold time and bend in and out of spatial reality. So it's special. It's, the other geometries, they're awesome in their own way, but the Tesseract has been around in the collective consciousness for quite a while. If you remember long ago with the book, A Wrinkle in Time, it recounts the dangers of time travel and that you can get lost in other dimensional realities. It's got a happy ending, but the book starts with the line, "The Tesseract is real." And it is. The time travel concept has also been popularized in the Marvel Comics series, The Avengers, one of my favorites. In the series, the Tesseract is the most prized, sought after, and precious commodity because of the power that it holds to transport through time. So none of this is make-believe, although we would have been told that it was science fiction. But I assure you, the Tesseract is real. So I'm going to give you an overview. We're going to do a little PowerPoint. I'm going to share some esoteric wisdom about the Tesseract as I'm sharing some images of it. Part of why I love the Tesseract so much is because it really challenges us to consider that different dimensional realities exist, right? Maybe you're already on board with this, but maybe this is the first time that we're talking about hyperdimensional space and the potential for fourth dimension, fifth dimension, sixth dimension, and on, right? The Tesseract is a fourth dimensional shape. It doesn't actually exist here. The best way we can see it is to shine a light through the third dimensional geometry. Otherwise, we're kind of using our imagination, which is a great thing. And we're also asking our brains to think outside of the construct of time. So this material is pretty brain-breaking. It's part of why I love it. And you will likely walk out feeling a little bit altered. Number one, because we are aligning the hemispheres of our brains with drawing the geometry. Number two, because it's not actually a shape in this dimension. So we're talking about a fourth dimensional shape, but the implications are, what if we are living in a multi-dimensional reality, right? What's it like to move around knowing that there's a lot more going on than what we've been told? That's what the Tesseract invites us to do, right? So I want to take it as far as we can. I'm going to give you some information. It could possibly break your brain if we're lucky, and then we'll get into drawing. I do have a little video clip. It's super cute, and that will also really give you a brief overview of a third dimensional geometry, a fourth dimensional, and a fifth dimensional. So let's get into the PowerPoint. So one of the things that we're going to be playing with is the field of perception and allowing our visual interpretation to shift back and forth between what I would call realities, but it's more accurate to say perceptual fields, right? So playing with the visual of the red box in the front, the green box, the oranges, letting your eyes shift and not trying to control what you are seeing, simply moving back and forth between the different cubes and shapes that you see. We're going to play more with that in a little bit. So in geometry and physics, the Tesseract is the four-dimensional analog of the cube. The Tesseract is to the cube as the cube is to the square. Just as the surfaces of the cube consist of 6 square faces, the hypersurface of the Tesseract consists of 8 cubical cells, or 8 faces. Right? You can kind of see the 8. It takes a little while to train your brain, though. The Tesseract is the fourth dimension, while the cube represents the physical or third dimension. In the fourth dimension, there are multiple realities which are going on simultaneously. The tesseract, or hypercube, transcends time and place and can hold multiple definable locations and appearances. So really, we are going beyond our ordinary interpretation of geometry. We're going into the realms of manipulating space-time, which then implies that our existence is malleable. This geometry can kind of bust everything upside down, because if there's a shape that helps us bend time and move throughout the universe, then many of the precepts of our reality that we've been told might not be accurate. Whew, gonna go pretty deep here. So the truth is that the hypercube eightfold geometry is a vibrational waveform signature. Here we go. We can say that it is the spirit or astral dimension which coexists simultaneously with the physical level of reality, right? So the tesseract is touching the metaphysical aspect of reality as well as the physical. This shape moves in the astral. It can be said, because of its etheric nature, that it is of spirit. So we're accessing the very esoteric aspects of sacred geometry. It is supposed to twist your mind into knots, and try not to think too much or worry about it. So it's a little strange in a class to say, if you're confused, that's perfect. But it's really true. If you can allow yourself to release a desire to know what's going on and truly conceptually understand the tesseract, and rather move into the experiential mystery, to not need to know, to sit and observe with curiosity and allow any kind of wisdom or intelligence that wants to come through to receive that gift, if you will, that message from yourself, from your higher self, from your own wisdom that is here to inform you through the geometry. I'm telling you, man, it's just as far as you want to go, the geometry will take you. It is no coincidence that the tesseract holds the information of multiple important elements relating to sacred geometry, harmonics, physics, chemistry, and spirituality. I'm reading these, by the way. These are the eightfold geometry and fourth dimensional tesseract excerpts from Decoding the 8-Star Geometry by Ambassador Ehani. Even though I'm going to say something important, just let yourself get lost in the hypercube. If an individual chooses to look within him or herself, they can use this knowledge for alchemical processes relating to spiritual development and unlocking vast resources of energy potential, which is another way of saying tapping into your own wisdom and accessing source consciousness, right? The tesseract represents cosmic intelligence and cosmic knowledge of all that is. It is this cosmic intelligence that is able to shape, sculpt, and transform all elements. So ultimately, by going into the center of yourself, you will be able to use and apply the intuition and spiritual consciousness to evolve and grow, right? This is what the tesseract reflects back, that you can use the geometry as a mirror into your soul and your own innate wisdom, and that the spiritual intelligence that the 8-Star Geometry conveys is the realization of a process that is occurring outside of worldly time, right? The process of spirit, the process of energetics and tapping into universal consciousness is all outside of time. And if you want to take it all the way, there is no such thing as time. It's a construct we've been told is real. So real that it's woven into our entire existence. Try to go a handful of sentences without referencing time. It's pretty impossible. So it's even more impossible to step out of that construct, but it is possible because everything's actually happening simultaneously. Okay, so I have a small video that should help bring all of this together.
We live in a three-dimensional world where everything has length, width, and height. But what if our world were two-dimensional? We would be squashed down to occupy a single plane of existence, geometrically speaking, of course. And what would that world look and feel like? This is the premise of Edwin Abbott's 1884 novella, Flatland. Flatland is a fun mathematical thought experiment that follows the trials and tribulations of a square exposed to the third dimension. But what is a dimension anyway? For our purposes, a dimension is a direction, which we can picture as a line. For our direction to be a dimension, it has to be at right angles to all other dimensions. So a one-dimensional space is just a line. A two-dimensional space is defined by two perpendicular lines, which describe a flat plane, like a piece of paper. And a three-dimensional space adds a third perpendicular line, which gives us height and the world we're familiar with. So what about 4 dimensions, and 5, and 11? Where do we put these new perpendicular lines? This is where Flatland can help us. Let's look at our square protagonist's world. Flatland is populated by geometric shapes, ranging from isosceles triangles to equilateral triangles to squares, pentagons, hexagons, all the way up to circles. These shapes are all scurrying around a flat world, living their flat lives. They have a single eye on the front of their faces, and let's see what the world looks like from their perspective. What they see is essentially one dimension, a line. But in Abbott's Flatland, closer objects are brighter, and that's how they see depth. So a triangle looks different from a square, looks different from a circle, and so on. Their brains cannot comprehend the third dimension. In fact, they vehemently deny its existence, because it's simply not part of their world or experience. But all they need, as it turns out, is a little boost. One day, a sphere shows up in Flatland to visit our square hero. Here's what it looks like when the sphere passes through Flatland from the square's perspective. And this blows his little square mind. Then, the sphere lifts the square into the third dimension, the height direction where no Flatlander has gone before, and shows him his world. From up here, the square can see everything. The shapes of buildings, all the precious gems hidden in the earth, and even the insides of his friends, which is probably pretty awkward. Once the hapless square comes to terms with the third dimension, he begs his host to help him visit the fourth and higher dimensions. But the sphere bristles at the mere suggestion of dimensions higher than 3 and exiles the square back to Flatland. Now, the sphere's indignation is understandable. The fourth dimension is very difficult to reconcile with our experience of the world. Short of being lifted into the fourth dimension by a visiting hypercube, we can't experience it. But we can get close. You'll recall that when the sphere first visited the second dimension, he looked like a series of circles that started as a point when he touched Flatland, grew bigger until he was halfway through, and then shrank smaller again. We can think of this visit as a series of 2D cross-sections of a 3D object. Well, we can do the same thing in the third dimension with a 4-dimensional object. Let's say that a hypersphere is the 4D equivalent of a 3D sphere. When the 4D object passes through the third dimension, it'll look something like this. Let's look at one more way of representing a 4-dimensional object. Let's say we have a point, a 0-dimensional shape. Now we extend it out 1 inch, and we have a 1-dimensional line segment. Extend the whole line segment by 1 inch, and we get a 2D square. Take the whole square and extend it out 1 inch, and we get a 3D cube. You can see where we're going with this. Take the whole cube and extend it out 1 inch, this time perpendicular to all 3 existing directions, and we get a 4D hypercube, also called a tesseract. For all we know, there could be 4-dimensional life forms somewhere out there, occasionally poking their heads into our bustling 3D world and wondering what all the fuss is about. In fact, there could be whole other 4-dimensional worlds beyond our detection, hidden from us forever by the nature of our perception. Doesn't that blow your little spherical mind?
Ah, yes, hidden from us forever by the nature of our perception, right? So what we're trying to do is shake up our limited perceptions. So we're going to have a brief exercise in playing with our visual perception, at least. Hopefully that will lead to shifting in our cognitive perceptions. But this is the intro into a Necker cube experience. And what we're doing is shifting our field of perception back and forth so that in the top right box, you sometimes see a red cube sitting in a green three-walled room. And then sometimes you see a sugar cube, a green sugar cube with a red cube taken out of the left front top corner. Right, so your eyes will naturally go back and forth between seeing either of those images. And we're going to put a timer on and actually let our vision play with the experience of the front of a cube being prominent in your field of vision, or the quote-unquote back of the cube, or the other face of the cube coming in front of your visual field, right? So you're either going to see this image or this image. The cube will open to the bottom left or the top right. So I'm literally just going to put the timer on for 1 minute, and we're going to play with which face of the cube is prominent for you. And let yourself release the need to know. Bring in your observing self and your witness and watch the process. See who's in charge of making the perceptual shifts. Here we go for a minute. Taking a nice deep breath really helps. Okay, how was that? What did you notice? I so wish we were in a class together that I could hear you. But a lot of times people talk about the speed of the back and forth, or how they try to choose to hold on to one and they can't, which I have had that experience as well. I can't control the flip, and I've tried to, and it's also fun to just watch how it organically shifts. And then is it curious, does one side of the cube represent one hemisphere of the brain and your right brain or left brain dominance? All sorts of fun things. And of course, this experience helps us with the other perceptual changes in reality. If you're familiar with MC Escher's art and play with perceptual reality, this is the essence of what he's doing, right? This is the essence of not only manipulating our visual cues, but also the implications for what is real? What is actually real? Do we actually know? That's why the Tesseract is so cool. It challenges the fundamental principles of what you believe reality to be, which is in some senses time travel, right? So, all right, we're just about to get into drawing. I want to tell you that we're not just going to draw 2 cubes and 4 lines through them, right? The geometry is so beautiful at every step of the way that I want to take you through the lovely multi-stepped process so that you have the basis for artwork, whichever point you want to stop. The mystery that's beyond the cognitive understanding of geometry is really where the magic and alchemy necessary to create an extraordinary life exists. So I'm giving you all of this information so that we can try to understand it, but paradoxically, don't try to understand it. So that's the fun part of the Tesseract. I say we get right into drawing. Enough of the fascinating info. Here we go.